Dive View. World champion surfer Lane Beachley is on Arn's brush with fame. Then further back in time for dinner. Later, the Great Acceleration.
Tonight, an extraordinary standoff. Australian journalists rushed out of China after seeking diplomatic protection.
Very disappointing to have to leave under those circumstances, and it's a relief to be back in a country with genuine rule of law.
Also tonight, Julian Assange suffers a setback in his extradition hearing. His lawyers failed to delay proceedings. A new team for a new term. The Territory's ministry sworn in at Government House. And when baby comes with the job, the Darwin business mums in the running for a national award. Good evening, Eleni Roussos with ABC News. The end of an era came with a midnight knock on the door. Two Australian journalists, including the ABC's China correspondent Bill Birtles, have been rushed out of China amid fears they faced arbitrary detention. They were safely bundled out of the country after a week-long diplomatic standoff. Here's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts.
After almost 5 decades, the ABC checks out of China. Bill Birtles' lonely departure ending a tense 7-day ordeal. The ABC's China correspondent for 5 years, Birtles is now back in Australia.
It's a relief to be back in a country with genuine rule of law.
His posting time cut short by a late-night visit from Chinese officials.
Midnight on Wednesday, the knock at the door came and there were 6 state security police plus a translator.
Last week, Australia's embassy warned him to get out of China, but before he could get on a plane, police barred him from leaving.
That's when this standoff, this diplomatic game of chess really commenced.
Good morning from Shanghai.
And there were 2 pawns. The Australian Financial Review's China correspondent Michael Smith was also banned from leaving. Both men ended up taking refuge on Australian diplomatic compounds, Birtles in Beijing and Smith in Shanghai, while Australian and Chinese officials wrangled over their future.
Our embassy has, I think, worked very hard, very diligently in the past few days.
Chinese police said they wanted to discuss Cheng Lei, an Australian journalist working for Chinese state media who disappeared into detention last month.
The whole episode was about harassment.
Diplomats struck a deal. Both journalists would be able to leave China if they agreed to a token interview.
It felt very political, and I very much felt like a diplomatic tussle.
Whatever the motive, the relief is obvious.
It's so good to be home, so happy. I can't say any more at the moment.
And the consequences clear. For the first time in decades, no major Australian media outlet has a journalist left in China. Trust between Australia and China is now at bedrock levels, and that mutual suspicion isn't limited to officials and politicians. China craves understanding for its political system and for its achievements, but gaining that appreciation just became much harder for Australians. Still, the ABC hasn't given up on China.
We'll get straight back on the front foot and be seeking to put correspondents back there.
And neither has Bill Birtles.
Hopefully the winds of change might blow in one way or another, and the window to get back there in future at some point reopens.
But for now, the door is slammed shut. Stephen Jedgetts, ABC News, Canberra.
China's always resisted Western ideas about media freedom, but for the most part, it's tolerated foreign media, allowing it to chart its astonishing rise from a poor nation to a global power. Until today, the ABC had been a constant witness, but there's no indication if or when it will ever be allowed back. National Affairs correspondent Greg Jennett.
When the bamboo curtain lifted for a glimpse, Australians were among the first to slip behind it.
There's no need for very long discussions.
So began a long era of listening, watching and reporting on China.
This city, with its 7 million inhabitants, runs on bicycles.
In 1973, Paul Raphael became the ABC's first Peking-based correspondent.
They appeared well-fed and cheerful.
Dozens would follow as reporters, camera operators and producers. Through 47 turbulent years, the communist regimes tolerated, even if not enjoyed, the telling of its stories to the world.
Tens of thousands of people continue to march through the streets of Beijing. The Chinese authorities had had enough.
The regime's tension with Western media has been a constant, especially with its tendency to expose human rights abuses. But the flight of reporters Birtles and Smith marks a turning point and a breaking point.
We have to realise that we're dealing with a sort of a renegade authoritarian state that will do anything to cement the power of Xi Jinping.
By expulsion, visa cancellation or volition, the ranks of foreign media have been shrinking for months. Arbitrary detention is a risk these days highlighted in Australia's official travel advice. Bill Birtles and his fellow traveller may have avoided it, in no small part because of the intervention by the ambassador to Beijing and his team.
It is alarming when you see exit bans placed on Australian journalists.
It is disappointing that after many years, Australia will not have a media organisation present in China.
We always welcome foreign journalists. China protects the legitimate rights of the journalists.
The relationship's a mess, never worse in 30 years. But Maurice Payne's ruled out tit-for-tat expulsions of Chinese reporters here, focused on diplomacy salvaging whatever's left intact. This is not so much about Australia as it is about control. With every escalation, China's signalling its determination to project its image and its message on its own terms. There's something to be gained in that for Beijing and something to be lost too.
Come on, this is China.
Including the good stuff, like China's sufferings and setbacks.
The whole place has been destroyed.
Its near miraculous economic transformation. Its culture and traditions.
These performances are so important.
Over, spectacularly, in a blackout of unknown duration. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Canberra.
In Victoria, there are 55 new cases of coronavirus, with another 8 deaths reported today. Part of the strategy there to combat COVID has been mandatory masks. New research shows 2/3 of Australians think they should be compulsory in public spaces everywhere. Casey Briggs has more.
It's the fashion accessory that will define 2020. Masks have taken the world by storm. The trend hasn't caught on as fast here, but a new survey by Vox Pop Labs with the ABC suggests that's changing.
We think it's important. We have to be careful after what's happened in Victoria.
Through May and early June, less than a third of people strongly or somewhat agreed that masks should be mandatory in all public spaces. But as Victoria's second wave began, that picked up, reaching a clear majority in July, and more than 2/3 have now agreed for 7 weeks straight. Support is strongest in Victoria, but there's strong support across the entire country, including in states where there's been virtually no local transmission, like Western Australia and the Northern Territory. Despite that strong support, it seems many outside Victoria aren't wearing them.
It's definitely not yet ingrained in our culture.
I don't feel that there's a risk, but if things change, then I would be I would think it would probably be sensible.
That gap is starkest in Western Australia and the Northern Territory. Despite all this support for masks, just 15% of people say they're actually wearing them. In New South Wales and the ACT, 78% of people say that they're wearing a mask. That's self-reported, even if it's not being seen on the streets of Sydney. And the New South Wales Premier isn't about to make them compulsory.
We are seeing the rate of mask wearing increasing across the board, whether it's in supermarkets, shopping malls, public transport.
It's a habit that needs to be built.
We're more likely to follow people who are our role models. We're more likely to follow people we like.
A trend many experts are hoping Australians come to embrace. Casey Briggs, ABC News.
The COVID crisis has hit aged care hardest, but it's also exposed confusion at the borders for those wanting to work in the sector. The inconsistencies in who and who can't re-enter Australia for work is prompting bigger questions about workforce shortages, as political reporter Matthew Doran explains.
Kathmandu is half a world away from Tasmania, but while Spana Nakami hasn't been able to travel, her thoughts are often back in Hobart, from where her colleagues at an aged care centre provide updates on some of her favourite residents.
They still remember me, who I am and what kind of person I was.
After 4 years working in Hobart, the highly qualified carer and nursing assistant made a quick dash home to care for her sick mother. But it coincided with Australia locking down its borders to lock out the worst of coronavirus.
I was just here for 3 weeks. I just got stuck here.
Foreigners wanting to enter Australia must have the skills deemed to be in the national interest, and only if they have a letter from an employer vouching for them. Only registered nurses working in aged care qualify for a travel exemption according to one government list, but other aged care workers aren't included. Another list, which defines critical skills, is more vague. People working in medical technology, agriculture and engineering can apply. Aged care was quietly added when the ABC started asking questions.
It just beggars belief that when you have a sector in such crisis and a workforce in such crisis, that the government's not doing everything it can.
After 9 rejections, Spana's 10th application was accepted. The timing, again, when the ABC started investigating her case.
I was very happy and relieved when I saw the email.
Border Force says more than 5,000 exemptions have been granted since Australia's borders closed, but it won't say exactly how many aged care workers have been given permission to travel. And while the agency insists that caring for vulnerable elderly Australians is considered a critical skill, it doesn't tally up with Spana's experience and that of others battling to get to Australia. With the first hurdle cleared, the next is finding a flight to get home. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
There are growing fears about the rate of new coronavirus infections in parts of the United Kingdom. The country has recorded 2 days of almost 3,000 cases, the biggest numbers in over 3 months. And it's following a similar trend to France and Spain, which have seen sharp rises in recent weeks after easing lockdown restrictions. Many of the new infections are among young people, and experts say they're spreading the virus to older people in some European countries. Europe correspondent Samantha Hawley reports from London.
The UK's reprieve from COVID-19 is over as travellers return from summer holidays, bringing the virus back with them. For a second consecutive day, the nation's recorded almost 3,000 new COVID-19 cases, the highest rate since mid-May.
We are going to see an increase in the UK. The fact that we've seen such a dramatic increase over a weekend period hopefully will ring the alarm bells.
As in Europe, it's the young driving the numbers up. A third of all cases were recorded in the 20 to 29-year-old age group. The death rate, though, remains low, at an average 8 a day.
We are concerned about this rise in cases, of course we are, and it's predominantly amongst younger people. But, of course, younger people can pass on the disease to their grandparents, and we do not want to see that.
Student groups aren't impressed, blaming mixed government messaging instead.
Last week, we were being told, eat out to help out, go to the pub, get ready to move across the country, go to university, set up a new household, gear up for face-to-face teaching. And this week we're being told, it's your fault that you're spreading the virus.
It's clear young adults, likely sick of social distancing, are causing the spike. And that's why the number of deaths hasn't increased too. But scientists warn shielding older age groups will become more difficult if the case numbers continue to increase at the current rate.
In Spain, an unwanted milestone was reached. It became the first Western European nation to record more than 500,000 cases. Samantha Hawley, ABC News, London.
Two other news, and the former Foreign Minister Bob Carr says the Morrison government should ask the US to drop extradition proceedings against Julian Assange. Mr Carr says if the Australian WikiLeaks founder was extradited, it would serve as an effective death sentence. Europe correspondent Linton Besser reports.
It's a showdown 11 years in the making. The might of Washington versus the Australian founder of WikiLeaks, and an unprecedented test case for press freedom.
It's an oppression of journalism and free press everywhere in the Western world. It can't go on. It has to stop now.
A cleanly shaven Julian Assange stood behind glass in the dock. Asked, "Do you consent to be extradited?" He answered no.
1-8, okay, clear. Come on.
Accused of encouraging the theft of thousands of classified documents from US government computers, Mr Assange's lawyers say President Donald Trump is pursuing the case for political reasons, in breach of the US Constitution.
It is the most important fight.
His team complained of new charges now being levelled against Mr Assange, but Judge Vanessa Baraitz rebuffed the defence's application to delay the hearing until next year. Julian Assange's partner and former lawyer Stella Morris tried to deliver a petition to Downing Street to have the extradition halted.
I'm fighting for his life. He won't survive if he's extradited.
It's getting to be shameful that this can be happening and Australia is not officially speaking up.
Mr Assange's legal team warned the court that should the Australian be extradited to the United States, his mental health would deteriorate so acutely he'd be at high risk of suicide. Linton Besser, ABC News, London.
Still to come this hour, fears a farm worker shortage could see grocery bills soar.
Our current estimate is that we have approximately half the number of people we need.
This is work many Australians don't want to do.
It's heartbreaking.
Plus, we reveal the sky-high fees charged to older Australians in home care. That's coming up.
A man has died after being attacked by a shark on the Gold Coast. The man in his 50s was attacked while surfing at Greenmount Beach at Coolangatta late this afternoon. Lifeguards and bystanders rushed to the surf to help the man.
Lifeguards noticed some commotion in the surf and some surfers helping another surfer after being attacked by a shark.
I looked and I saw a board with what looked like teeth marks in it.
Paramedics say the man died from critical leg injuries. NT WorkSafe is investigating the death of a 39-year-old man who died while working at sea over the weekend. It says the man died on Sunday night west of Charles Point. St John Ambulance received reports of a man falling overboard. Police are also investigating the death. Territory Labor's new ministry was sworn in this morning, with the Chief Minister officially assuming his new responsibility as Treasurer. The Fresh Look Cabinet have rallied behind their captain and welcomed two new faces into the fold. Kate Ashton reports.
A brisk walk towards a new term of government.
We've got two ripper new additions to the team.
Family watched on as the Territory's 9 ministers were sworn in at Government House. After some nervous laughter, the newest ministers were welcomed.
It's all very important work that needs to be done, and as I said, I'll be doing that as quickly as possible.
I have given a commitment to the people of Central Australia to be a strong advocate for them.
The fresh faces are among a handful of members stepping into more senior roles.
We're part of a team, and what the captain asked us to do, we will do. It's been an absolute honour to be Attorney-General and Minister for Justice, and I'm proud of the work that's been established there, but I know that Minister Ubo will carry that on.
I do whatever role the Chief Minister gives me, so that is your job when you're in a cabinet. You do what your captain needs you to do.
With the captain's pick for Treasurer coming out ready to defend himself. He denied that being Chief Minister and Treasurer at the same time was a consolidation of power.
The Treasury role I see as critical for economic leadership. It's not just a fiscal folio, it's an economic folio. And it's about how I lead the charge.
And his strategy as Treasurer for dealing with the billions of dollars of territory debt?
We have to control the virus. That's the key to growing the economy.
A common theme as Cabinet met this morning, with the first sitting dates of the new Parliament expected to be announced later this week. Kate Ashton, ABC News.
As the Territory's Cabinet Ministers adjust to their new roles, so too do thousands of NT government public servants bracing for a shake-up, with government departments being slashed from 15 to 11. Questions are being raised about how the new system will work.
Chief Minister Michael Gunner is selling it as a red tape slashing start to his second term, a major merger of government agencies.
I wanted better, quicker decision making. I see this as the way to deliver it.
Portfolios are being combined and departments cut from 15 to 11. But some are questioning exactly how it will work on the ground and how the Gunner government will stick to its pledge that public servants' jobs will remain safe.
Whenever there is change, there's always uncertainty for people.
Kay Densley's union represents those Territory public servants trying to get their heads around the changes. And she says there are concerns about how already busy agencies will maintain focus once some are merged into mega departments.
I guess it's a matter of issues being lost, or focus being on one part of an extremely large agency and not on others.
Among the changes, tourism will be merged with industry and trade, and housing will be combined with Territory families, a move welcomed by the Aboriginal legal sector.
When you've got young families and children, a lot of the big impacts they have is in relation to housing, accessing housing, emergency housing. So, it makes sense to have them linked together.
The Chief Minister, who is also the new Treasurer, says combining the departments will save Territorians $5 million via natural attrition of jobs. Others aren't so certain.
There's no evidence, same in local government. Every time people merge things, it's going to save money. It doesn't, it just creates more senior managers.
The agency changes will come into effect over the coming days. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
The long-time Mayor of Katherine, Faye Miller, will walk away from the job as she battles a chronic health condition. The 73-year-old was diagnosed with leukaemia earlier this year and says she wants to move closer to her health specialists. A former CLP Member of Parliament, she served as the current mayor since 2012. Ms Miller helped guide the town through its PFAS contamination crisis and made national headlines after a stoush with the Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt in 2018. She'll finish her tenure at the end of November. Running a business from home during a pandemic may not be ideal, especially when you have to share your workspace with the kids. But a group of Darwin women is proving, despite the obstacles, it can be done, and for their efforts are in a national competition, recognising mums in business.
It's a normal workday for Jessica Blackmore, who's busy packing orders for her online business. And even the kids are giving her a hand.
It can be really challenging. So my two are 16 months apart and neither of them love to sleep ever. So to try to fit in time was quite challenging, but I was really passionate about it. I really wanted to make it work.
She's one of 3 NT finalists in the Oz Mumpreneur Awards this year, a national initiative that recognises mothers who run their own business.
Being a stay-at-home mum doesn't mean that, you're just a little person, snack person. You can actually have a business, run a business, and make it work.
The awards are being held online this year, and for Bella Lambert, it's already been an exciting opportunity to connect with other business owners.
The ladies in my category I've connected with, and some of their businesses are amazing. So I feel that, especially this year, getting out there and getting recognised is really important for them.
But working from home isn't always so glamorous, with the backyard often doubling as an office.
Because he's an outside kid, we spend most of our time outside. So, having a laptop's handy to be able to be outside and just design.
And as most parents know, it's the day-to-day tasks that make it all the more challenging.
I guess, waking up
through the night with, a baby, so sleep deprivation.
You will always make time if it's something that you love and it's something that you enjoy, and it really helps to give a mum a bit of a sense of purpose. I love being a mum and I love my children, but I needed something. I needed something that was for me.
A hard day's work for all involved, with the end result well worth it. Emma Vincent, ABC News, Darwin.
To finance now, and Australia's vaccine manufacturer CSL led the local share market higher today, while the Australian dollar got back to 73 US cents. Here's Alan Kohler.
Investors are torn between optimism about a vaccine and anxiety about Australia's relationship with China. Today, optimism won, with vaccine manufacturer CSL leading the way and shopping centres and travel agents coming too. An artificial intelligence company, not a very big one, called BrainChip jumped 30% today and got a speeding ticket from the ASX. It's now increased 15-fold in 4 months. Is there anything you'd like to tell us, asked the ASX. Nope, said BrainChip. The US market was closed for Labor Day, but London stocks jumped 2.5%, while Asian markets generally went up as well. The iron ore price rose 1.5%. Base metals in London also went up, but gold fell. And the Australian dollar got back to 73 US cents and is up slightly against all the major currencies. Weekly payroll data from the ABS has shown a 0.6% pickup across Australia, but of course Victoria continues to lag. But actually the widening disparity between the states is not just Victoria versus the rest. The jobs chart of each state is spraying everywhere. Before and during the early stages of the pandemic, the states were virtually one line. Now, not so. From WA almost back to where it was, New South Wales, South Australia and Queensland all down about 3%, Tasmania down 4%, and all of them are recovering. Victoria is down nearly 8% and not yet recovering. Finally, graph of the day is this ripper of house prices to GDP per capita. For 100 years, the median house price was around 6.5 times GDP per person. And then from 2000, up it went to 11 times. Why? Well, perhaps it was because in 2000, capital gains tax was halved and household debt started taking off. And that's finance.
In tennis, Australia's Alex de Minaur is through to his first Grand Slam quarter-final. The US Open's 21st seed.
Obviously very, very happy. At the end of the day, this is where I want to be, and this is where I truly believe I belong. Our second weeks of Slam.
Serena Williams' hopes of securing a record-tying 24th Grand Slam title remains alive as she moved into the quarterfinals with a 3-set victory over number 15 seed Maria Sakkari. And time for the weather now, and tonight's viewer pick was sent in by Robert Wesley Smith. It was a hot day across the territory with gusty winds over the top end. It reached a top of 37 degrees in Darwin and Warramayunga and 38 in Batchelor. It was very windy in Katherine this morning with 50-kilometre gusts recorded just before lunch, and above average temperatures continued in Central Australia. Around Australia today, daytime temps were up in the southeast, 24 degrees in Sydney and Brisbane, 18 in Adelaide, and in Melbourne it hit 20. On the satellite, a cloud band stretches across southern Australia with mostly clear skies elsewhere. A ridge along the Queensland coast directs warm easterly winds across the territory, and a heat trough is impacting the western top end. Interstate tomorrow, rain for Sydney, Canberra and Perth, cloudy in Hobart and sunny for Adelaide. To our north, storms again in Bangkok and Singapore, cloudy in Jakarta. Back home, staying warm and windy across the territory south tomorrow, 33 at the top for Alice Springs and Tennant Creek. It'll be partly cloudy along the Arnhem coast with hot, dry and windy conditions inland. Staying warm and humid across the far north tonight, 36 the top for Darwin and 35 for Wadeye. A severe fire danger warning remains in place for Darwin and Adelaide River as those hot and gusty easterlies push through. High tide tomorrow morning will be just after 9 o'clock and there'll be a low tide for sunset. The sun will rise tomorrow around 6:45 and will set at 6:43. And looking ahead for Darwin, becoming more humid at night, winds easing later in the week. In Alice Springs, northerly winds will keep daytime temperatures up all week with mild conditions at night. And to stay up to date with the latest news from the Northern Territory, head to our website, news.abc.net.au. Stay with us now. Michael Rowland is up next with 7:30.